When you think of zombies, you're more than inclined to think of either the slow, decaying, lumbering, brain-dead brain eaters or the fast-moving, ravenous, mindless, and animalistically violent infected. But in some cases, the archetype of the zombie can be drastically different. In the case of the sadness, it's less zombie and more your darkest desires taking over to consume your body and mind. What if a viral pathogen made you the most violent psychopath you can possibly be while keeping parts of you alive? What do I mean by that? And how does this differentiate from the ZQNs of I am a hero to be better or worse as a threat to your survival? What does it say about what is innate in every man, woman, and child on Earth? Well, let's find out. Today, we are discussing why you wouldn't survive the Sadness's Alvin psychopath zombie apocalypse. Originating somewhere in Taiwan, a virus suddenly sprang up one day, spreading slowly but surely, not immediately causing any red flags to the public or governmental entities. In the beginning, many scientific officials and leaders pegged the disease as nothing more than a simple flu, ringing similarly to Left 4 Dead's aptly titled green flu virus, likening it to something common and unthreatening, most likely to prevent mass panic and hysteria. In the early stages, this may seem the best way to stay the course, but in reality, allowing a completely unknown virus with unknown capabilities to just run rampant and infect a population without proper warning gives it the worst possible breeding ground for it to multiply. While rumblings of its potential loomed in social media posts and chatter on television, many doubted the very existence of the virus at all. People were considering it as media sensationalism, conspiracy theories, the whole 9 yards. It's blatant in the opening how it boils down to basically a Jubilee-surrounded YouTube video, a coughing baby versus an atomic bomb political discussion between two individuals, a confident idiot political grifting influencer with no care for public safety except what benefits their ad revenue at the end of the day, pointing out 0 deaths and its coincidental emergence during an election year. Him arguing against a real medical scientist going over the hyper-mutative viral load that is this Alvin virus, and how turning it into a political game will only work in its favor and our downfall. While this debate rages in the cultural zeitgeist, normal people just spectate and largely ignore it. When any flu-like symptoms emerge for a person, they can just say it can be rested off, and seeking medical attention for it is not worth the wait in those long lines at the hospital. There's just no cause for concern that it's a hoax for the rich to buy stocks at low prices to sell high later on. This Alvin is as much of a threat as a chipmunk, or maybe 3 of them. But what exactly does the Alvin do anyways? Dubbed the Alvin nationwide, the virus itself is heavily inspired by the disease from the comic book series The Crossed, although the name Alvin is nowhere to be seen from this material. So why specifically the name Alvin? No idea. I spent hours trying to find any reason for this naming convention. The Old English etymology suggests Alvin means elf friend, but I wouldn't say any of the infected in this film resemble elves or are all that friendly. Maybe it's named after Dr. Alvin Lee, a microbiologist and virologist of 20 years that works in food safety in the United States. Maybe it's named after YouTuber Doc Alvin Francisco, who debunks myths on health conditions. Maybe the guy that discovered this virus was just simply named Alvin. Maybe it was given such a dweeby name to make the disease sound less dangerous than it was. Again, much like America did with the green flu in Left 4 Dead. Regardless of where the name comes from, it's what it does to people that is the most important thing to note in terms of your survivability. The disease itself has origins in horrific real-world diseases. Primarily that dormant protein chains in Alvin exist from the Lysa order of viruses, the prototype causative agent of rabies, basically in the same deadly family as the primarily mammalian Rhabdoviridae, starting off its infection seeming like just, again, a simple flu-like virus. Think of it like a covert pathogen polluting as many people as possible under the radar. Like you're playing a game of Plague Inc. as the disease, where you try to make your disease the least noticeable as possible before you start ramping up symptoms all at once to make it completely all-consuming. In the case of Alvin, when the virological clock ticks, the virus will mutate rapidly to a new stage. Lying dormant in seemingly slightly sick people, those affected will periodically display much more severe and immediate symptoms symptoms and changes in behavior depending on their physiology and immune system. Eyes becoming fully black and swollen, blood slightly dripping from the eyes, profuse sweat all over the body, but most notably is a devilish smile from ear to ear. When all of these outward symptoms are prominent, the host will have been fully converted. But to what? All infected peoples will suddenly go wild, attacking anyone that is not a carrier, thusly dubbed an Alvin. Since normally with rabies, a prion will actively go to the brain to irreversibly damage a host. In this case, once within the brain, the Alvin virus will begin to drastically reprogram a victim. In layman's terms, it's going into your mind and wiping out anything that is not pure id. The id being our primitive and instinctual part of our mind, housing what our basic drives and desires, such as sex, hunger, and other more depraved and repressed desires. With the death of the ego and superego within our gray matter, all that's left is a person operating on the pleasure principle, seeking immediate gratification without considering reality or social norms. A virus that isolates and magnifies that part of your brain that will become nightmare fuel, making each and every person under its influence commit wanton acts of murder, rape, and torture. Empathy will simply no longer be a factor in the critical thinking of any Alvin. Humanity's darkest impulses will be put center stage. All infectees, no matter their state of mind or pre-existing tendencies, will become murderous, stark-raving, intellectual but feral people. Summarized, an Alvin is an intelligent zombie with all the capabilities of a regular person, but without a pain response, being stronger, more agile, and just being able to communicate, looking to maim, dismember, torture, grape, and kill people however they can, in the most sadistic and masochistic ways possible. They will be speaking normally, well, talking, but with words that match these evil tendencies. Even if a person prior to the infection is the sweetest and most non-violent individual, the virus simply will take over their actions no matter what. What this all boils down to is a person will no longer be in control of their actions. However, depending on the deepest repressed desires of a person's id, this is a case-by-case basis between each individual person, whether it be violent tendencies or what, these only really factor into their speech and minuscule portions of their movement, nothing that will really slow them down. Meaning, if a person has always wanted to break every single commandment in the Bible, they will simply attack and slaughter as if they are doing so to their heart's content. If you had that feeling inside you, you will gladly be killing and doing a whole bunch of dark, horrible things, maliciously smiling, laughing, and basking in the blood that you are spilling. Those that don't house these tendencies will visibly seem regretful of their own actions to the point of visibly crying profusely, but unable to stop themselves in any meaningful manner, as if a person that's being a spectator in their own body. They're bearing witness to everything that's going on, but there's nothing they can do to slow down the actions of their frame. Regardless of how an Alvin speaks, the end results will be the same. The worst possible carnage a person can manage with the tools that they have around them at that specific time, and their bare hands will be happening with no hesitation whatsoever, doing whatever possible to inflict the most damage and slaughter to any healthy people that they can find. Most terrifyingly so, though, is the fact that the virus is basically telling the brain to do anything you want in terms of violence, so long as you spread the disease as much as possible while doing so. The first infected that we see in the movie The First Encounter proves this, as the old woman Alvin in the white hair chooses to spit a glob of mucus at a man that was just simply seeking to help her, hitting him square in the face, before she decides to take a nearby boiling fryer and douse his friend, melting his flesh as she gleefully peels his skin, laughing maniacally as the meat from his face just gets torn off. Her fingers fingers sinking in. She is not fazed whatsoever by the scalding hot oil she is laying her fingers into. She is just taking pleasure in the gore she is creating and in the way that she made it happen. All while this horrific act is occurring and bystanders are standing there like stunned idiots, the person that had been spat on already had contracted the Alvin virus and fully succumbed to its influence, meaning it has a transmission and conversion time similar to 28 days later's rage virus, traveling through the eyes and mouth and immediately inhibiting the brain. It is that fast. While initially the Alvin virus covertly spread as what people deemed a common flu, it seems once people start to fully develop the worst symptoms, any and all further infected people will simply adopt the latest developments of the virus that the person that's spreading it has. So, at any moment, an infected person can choose to try to butcher you or simply spit in your face or throw some of their blood on you to turn you into one of them, a sadomasochist looking to do any kind of carnage they can. It simply comes down to an infected dealer's choice. They can kill or infect. I will always say in these scenarios that even though a person is technically alive and sentient when infected by something like the Alvin virus, I do not consider them alive in the sense of self. No matter what, you will lose control of your body. All that's up to your personality is whether or not you'll enjoy what your body is being forced to do. But realistically, you are dead and just a horrible monster of a person now. Probability-wise though, if the infected numbers have hit a high point or if a person that's infected just really did not like you prior or just simply do not like what you look like, you'll probably be dead within minutes in the most gruesome ways possible. Limbic systems all but relinquished to the Alvin. Their methods of murder will only be limited to their pre-existing ideas, creativity, and their environment. People will retain their full cognitive functions in critical thinking, problem solving, and tool use, wielding weapons, opening doors, finding different paths to prey, and using stealth to catch victims off guard. Hell, these feral bastards can aim and fire guns for God's sake. These are pretty much normal people but now violent psychopaths. They could still be killed by any conventional methods that would normally neutralize a normal human being. However, due to the Alvin virus's control, those afflicted will basically feel little to no pain, shrugging off what would normally debilitate most people. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The pain experienced actually gives them masochistic pleasure, so much so that even people that become infected that were already being tortured beforehand and broken apart will say shit like this. Amplifying their actions and oftentimes rewarding their bodies with endorphins. Their bodies are now seeking that rush, a sexual consummation released when inflicting and receiving high amounts of pain, causing them to slip further into their murder sonas. They'll be so caught up in the concept of what the id is curious about that even eating and sucking on the flesh of other people will be something to indulge in. If not fully killed, they will quickly get back up to pursue you to satiate their narrow-minded and bloody goals, needing to critically injure them to put them down as their pain threshold is working opposite of any normal person. In fact, if it hurts them, it just basically turns them on. They will also be trying to communicate with people to get inside their head, to mess with them, or lull them into a false sense of security before striking or putting them into a panic state. Some speak as if their mind is stuck in a permanent state of limbo or falling back on previous conversations with people before they were fully infected by the Alvin virus. An example of this would be the neighbor who says right before chopping off the fingers of our protagonist, other Alvins will use information they know about others to really get under their skin to goad them into attacking them to make them viable for slaughter or infection. Using public broadcasting and media outreach to relay horrific messages to the population at large, as shown early in the film when one guy said that all men should come to him at a specific place to have their dicks chopped off and fed to dogs, proceeding to laugh maniacally over the intercom for hours, feeding into the already chaotic disarray unfolding across the greater area. While you are running away from those virological lunatics, all they will be saying is how much they are loving it, and I mean really loving it. The use of the virus among the infected to strike fear into the widest population possible will be jaw-dropping. This zombie-like epidemic will be put on full horrific display to not be hidden anymore when shit starts hitting the fan. Starting from a whisper to infesting the mind of one of China's high-ranking government officials delivering a state of emergency address to the entire country, as he reports that in just a few hours that an estimated 4.5 million people were Alvins, which is about 15 to 20% of the population that had already turned, were torturing, killing, and raping. During the address, he himself succumbs to the illness, changing his demeanor on the spot, and in a split second pulls out a fragmentation grenade that was in his pocket to shove it in his advisor's mouth, and then gleefully turn him around and put his head up for the world to see. As it explodes into pieces, the television broadcast is promptly cut off. I guess politicians really don't like each other, but then again, who does like a politician? Political commentary. But the act will signal that this common flu will lead to mankind killing one another with twisted pleasure, and this will cause further pandemonium on a global scale. Anyone could be infected and turn at any time. World organizations could turn on us. We are all left to our own devices and of those around us. Everyone will start fighting for resources against one another to make sense of it all and to come to grips with this new reality, causing such commotions and stirs that Alvins will easily strike them while they are all at each other's throats. People will witness scattered cases of violent crimes here and there, bloody aftermaths of events not seen, or people fighting in the streets or in businesses, the sound of people being brutalized and butchered everywhere. The sheer fact that millions became Alvins in a few hours, turning up to 1/5 of the Chinese population in that time, means anarchy, destruction, and the apocalypse will be upon us. The swiftness and the behavior of the Alvins will be unlike anything humanity has ever experienced. The public will have no way of knowing who is a threat or not in quick situations. Seeing injured civilians and being indecisive on either helping them, closing them out, or killing them. Some of these infected will enter a semi-dormant state once they have killed a victim with no other bodies to infect around, electing to just stare at mutilated and blood-soaked bodies for ages without even moving, glaring into the abyss in their giblet-filled splendor. One girl felt her flesh as it was soaked in blood and smiled in a state of euphoria as the blood of another dripped from the ceiling. The businessman just soaking in his reddened hands. The businessman would just mentally soak in the sight of his reddened hands as if his life now had purpose. An antithesis to that old nomenclature of washing the blood from one's hands, now transformed to embracing and letting it stain one's hands, possibly being the only enjoyment that these things can get when there are no healthy innocents around to kill, akin to some zombies who will just enter an idle state until viable food sources or hosts that they can infect are detected, like in Left 4 Dead, Last of Us, I Am Legend, and more, only actively hunting when they are aware of more humans to pursue, where Alvins will participate in the zombie attribute of flocking together in hordes. When a noise is heard or general human-like activity is discerned, Alvins will immediately suss out the source and gather to give chase, to corner, whittle down, or publicly torture an individual, even with infected teenagers casting stones at Jim and laughing about it. The fact that at first everything in society just seemed normal. Just a few sick-looking people here and there, no cause for urgent alarm. You just hear stuff about it on the news, people hyping it up, but politicians saying, they're just trying to sway it to the one side that's against what I want. But then one person suddenly will change and proceed to attack anyone nearby. This is the greatest reason that this will be such a catastrophic beginning for this pandemic, as seen in the subway scene when everyone was going about their business as usual, when one young man in shades stood up to look at the people around him. All these people were focused on their phones and their own isolated obliterated lives. The young man sheds a single tear, knowing that he has lost control of his body and, more importantly, to the all-consuming impulses in his mind. He pulls out a knife that was most likely for self-defense in his healthy life to stab a guy to death and start slicing up many people in the claustrophobic bindings of the cart. While spectators will watch on in horror at what's going on, thinking this is an isolated incident, this act may trigger transformations in other onlookers unprompted. It's very likely that when one Alvin carrier gives in to their urges that are being stirred by the virus and starts to maim and kill, other carriers that see this will follow suit, as if the barrier of societal and human norms are broken down at that very moment, and their poisoned minds are pushed beyond the point of no return. The floodgates will open, and any person around you, maybe even you, will start to attack without any control of your body, resorting to biting people's throats and ripping out their Achilles tendons with their teeth, jamming their thumbs into their eye sockets to watch skulls ooze out, committing horrific sexual acts on any person, licking open wounds of people just to know the sensation, to clothing and strapping people to poles to hit them with bats. Eyewitness accounts even recount how little girls were burned alive while their fathers simply chuckled at the sight. Bodies being disemboweled and dismembered to be cannibalized. Acts so visually messed up that we couldn't really even show them to you, or YouTube would treat us the same way monetarily as an Alvin would us physically. Like, I'm not even kidding, there is like an actual full-on blood orgy that goes on for like almost a minute. The depravity displayed will mentally destroy any healthy people bearing witness to it on the fly, causing them to break down and be easy fodder for the Alvins. Creepy people with lustful and violent appetites, like the old man on the subway trying to get to know Jim's girlfriend and where she works, will have that aspect about their personality completely consume them. This is all they were under the skin. Before the man's transformation, he already harbored resentment towards women and considered them solely as sex objects, considering them talking back to him as the degradation of his country. So those with these buried cravings will become the most dangerous versions of the Alvin, becoming very goal-oriented, more inclined to fight well, and more ruthless than other variants. This lethality comes in the form of the tools they use. Despite knowing how to use weapons, Alvins will resort to any means necessary to neutralize a target. Formerly using an umbrella to puncture a young girl's eye, the old man has this weapon deflected in a skirmish with a tougher young person. In the blink of an eye, despite their age and strength difference, after he is punched in the face, he grabs the young man's face and bites into it like a rabid animal, finding a nearby axe right after he is stunned to finish him off with a couple chops, but not before winking at the women screaming in horror. If an infected has you in their sights and is determined enough, they will be able to sniff you out. Now, whether that's that they can actually smell you, I don't think that's the case, but the infected are able to determine who's healthy and who's not at a simple glance. Now, the infected will constantly be reiterating their intentions to you while they stalk you with no end in sight. Even when you are on the verge of killing these stalker variants, they will make sure to impart on you words that will stoke your frenetic state, with the creepy old man saying because that cat was killing him, that she was just like him because she was giving in to violent tendencies. Meaning no matter what, between each individual of the Alvins, they are looking to degrade your mental state. Now, this virus does transmit through normal vector methods like bites, blood, saliva, scratches, you know, the normal zombie stuff. But also, it goes through the air like a common cold. Even sexual fluids from contact with a non-murder Alvin will have you turn like the eyeless girl, who after her experience ended up embracing her sexual abuser, asking for more, leaving him to go and rip apart a human body to devour it and serve as a distraction for other Alvins so she may cut another body to eat it alive. Over time, the Alvin infected numbers will rise at a staggering rate. For every 1 to 2 people killed, another 5 to 6 will contract the full form of the virus. More and more eating the flesh of the living and dead, strapping people up for torture and their victims transforming to love the abuse and attempting to attack and kill anyone that tries to stop it. Working together to achieve their worst primal urges, whether it's gangbanging by murder or gangbanging by, you know what, never mind that turn of phrase. These infected intelligent enough to find people where they are hiding, lure them out with words of fear and provocation, cause mass panic to make the general public feud with one another to make them easy marks. They are aware of their surroundings, covering cameras, blocked doorways, looking for weapons, taking over communication systems, even driving vehicles to cause the most damage possible. Anything that a depraved person with no societal or religious restrictions would do and how they would do it, they will do. Zombies with not a taste for flesh, but horrific pleasure. Yes, they do eat and consume human meat, but that is if a person holds that desire in their mind and they don't even know it. And they also have the ability to wield whatever they can to get the job of slaughter or sexual conquest done, all stemming from what was considered a non-threat, a simple flu. Nothing to really be alarmed about, as doing so would just be career suicide for any politicians that could have slowed its pace with the nationwide lockdown. But screw that, we have an economy to look after. Maybe this could have prevented this pandemic from becoming unstoppable. I know some of you are already rolling your eyes, saying I have an agenda and that this message of this movie and the message of this movie released in 2021 shortly after the COVID pandemic is just propaganda, but there is some truth to it. I mean, look, those that valued their careers and a stable economy that allowed this virus to take over the largest population possible before showing what it really was capable of shows how this made it the worst kind of outbreak possible and gave it the strongest start it could get. As a virologist named Dr. Alan Wong in the movie says, that this Alvin virus is an evil curse as much as it is a disease, hijacking our limbic system and connecting it to the part of the brain that controls sexual urges and aggression, making them permanently entwined, leaving the parts of the brain capable of cognition and critical thinking alive purely to feed the needs of the now superpowered id. While he spends countless hours trying to create a cure or vaccine, he apparently had been using nearby babies in the maternity ward he barricaded himself in as test subjects to perfect his medical concoction. Sadly, each test baby that had turned had to be thusly killed. Having no more test subjects, he forcefully injects his latest form of the vaccine into Kat to see if his work in a vaccine would bear fruit. That is until Jim enters the hospital, where the bad doctor takes Kat to confront him to be blindsided by an infected, having his foot chopped in half by a fire axe. Falling to the ground, Jim shows up fully infected due to all the blood and injuries he had suffered from previous skirmishes with Alvins, to the dismay of his love, Kat. A fight ensues, with both of them becoming Alvins as they both revel in their deeds. Jim in his anger that he believes Kat cheated on him, and then the doctor who proudly proclaims he enjoyed murdering the infected infants. He took pleasure in it. Jim kills him, killing a fellow infected, displaying that friendly fire is possible amongst Alvins if one of them expresses emotions strong enough for certain people. In this case, a boyfriend thought the girlfriend was cheating, so he killed the man. Now, with a locked gate between Jim and Kat, Jim confides in Kat that the feeling of the virus is wonderful. He cannot get enough of it, as if his life finally had a purpose, ignoring the life that he had with her before he was infected. He said that hearing her scared voice through the phone wanting him to save her really drove him to go there further, and the only goal that he had in mind was not to save her, but to say that he only wanted to cut her tits off and smash her face in and peel her skin. Nothing else matters to the infected. He just wanted to brutalize his girlfriend. The infected, when their minds have been polluted know how to lure you in with what seems to be love, and then turn it into a twisted, bloody fantasy, still proclaiming his love for her and what seems to be shedding tears, but only wanting nothing but death and carnage. Kat, now with a biological vaccine unknown within her body, goes to the roof to the sounds of a helicopter, possibly escaping or possibly being gunned down. Her fate and the fate of the virus are unknown. But with everything said, what is the full capacity in which the Alvin virus can have you flatlining or beelining? Well, its spread is the biggest factor. A simple flu flying under the radar to pump those numbers to an incredibly high rate. The fact that carriers could fly in and out of the country in that initial time span to spread it worldwide gives this world-ending potential. Once that biological clock ticks in a number of people, it will be like a violent wildfire. Wherever and whoever harbors the disease will explode in a furious anger. Whether it be in isolation, in public settings, or televised, the bloodbath will be instant. But how bad could it really get? Not explored in its full capability is the fact that infected people retain the ability to use anything. Weapons held at home, in cars, or on oneself, anything will be used to their full effect for the highest body count. Every person that has or knows where a gun is will use it. This will basically turn into live ground warfare. Armed Alvins shooting up places, kneecapping people to torture them, using guns as violent tools of coercion. With coordinated Alvin efforts, you're looking at a sudden frontline infantry of crazy gun-toting lunatics storming the streets out for blood, booty, and bounty. Not only on the ground, but from the air. Planes and their pilots or infected hijackers will kamikaze to the earth like meteor showers, destroying buildings, driving into high population centers. Roads and highways will become demolition derbies. Vehicles will be seen all over townships attempting to run people over with high success rates. Everything will be a weapon with the highest killing proficiency. Hell, if soldiers and pilots elected to do so, they could use tanks, jets, and other military vehicles to devastate the land. With the amount of blood and damage going about, infected and death toll numbers will skyrocket beyond control. Armed forces and governments will attack one another, soldiers attacking civilians with high-tech and weaponry just for pleasure, governments launching damn nukes and high-powered explosives at other countries just to watch the world burn or wipe out lands they do not like, possibly even using biological warfare, adding to the sheer chaos of everything that is going on. Full cognitive function being hijacked to be used to enact what a person's deepest, darkest desires are. It would be awful. Racially motivated killings, group-motivated executions, gender-based or non-gender-based sexual deviancy, country-level destruction on a whim with a crooked smile watching over it all. Giving a zombie pandemic the ability of full thinking to allow a person to do what they want to do in the very dark recesses of the back of their mind pretty much means everyone being slaughtered, raped, tortured, and more. All while that's going on, you have loved ones and random people saying the most awful stuff to make your sanity slip further and further. And you are either going to be dying to it or being forced by the Alvin virus to eventually love every minute of it. Even if you survive encounters with all of these tools at their disposal, you would still have to find ways to refrain from just a drop of the virus getting in your bloodstream or potentially being breathed in. Trying to outlast this world with proper sanitation, defenses, and supplies will simply not work. If vehicles, bombs, hordes of people, and fires do not destroy your safe haven, the longevity of time will force you out, turning off power grids, destroying and polluting water supplies with poison, burning buildings, and more. If you avoid all of that, you still need the means to stay quarantined safely for an undetermined amount of time. Those Alvins out there are normal people acting on horrific desires. These are not mindless infected like the rage infected of 28 days later that's kind of been written out because of 28 years later, but they should die out from hunger after a certain amount of time. These Alvins will still eat, drink, and possibly even sleep when the body demands it. They still have some kind of self-preservation in those minds regardless, but most of the time they will be sitting in bloody bliss until they are alerted of other victims to brutalize, maybe even using your flesh for sustenance and enjoying it.
Thank you.
I am glad you had a good time eating
Thank you.
human meat.
They will persist even if they put themselves in harm's way. They will thrive in bloodshed, waiting for you to come out, screaming into megaphones on social media while it lasts, and on TVs and out your window, whittling down your psyche with the most messed up kind of words you can string together as an insane person. Loved ones knowing exactly what to say to get under your skin. The visions of the world you once knew becoming these killer lunatics will be too much to bear for many. This pandemic of infection is probably one of the worst possible for what it turns us into. There is no going back. And ultimately, once it's spread and Alvins are acting on desire, that is game over for mankind. And really, upon finishing writing this video, I can see why this movie was called The Sadness. That about wraps up this look into, quite frankly, what is now one of the most terrifying why you wouldn't survive scenarios I've covered so far. What do you think? Is there something I missed or should have explained more? Let me know down below and what you want to see next. Make sure to support the channel by contributing to me on Patreon as a patron, or becoming a YouTube channel member, or chipping in $1 or $2 over on my second channel, WSG Streams, during my weekly live streams of Left 4 Dead 2, where we play with friends and fans. It is a lot of fun. Do so and you can be featured on this awesome list here. Until next time, I'm Zach S, aka Wild Such Gaming. Never forget to stay happy, stay healthy, stay sane, and most importantly, stay wild.